we have Nancy Smith Watson with a remarkable organization called Feast of Crispian. And I will not do justice trying to really describe what it is. So Nancy, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you, fitting us in with your busy schedule. And really to get started, what is Feast of Crispian?
Yeah, it's I'll tell you, even after all these years, and we're coming up on our 9th year working through Feast of Crispian right now, it's still hard for me to fully explain to people what it is, but short version, we are a theater-based organization made up of actors and theater educators that in particular use Shakespeare, but theater skills as well, to work with people coming out of trauma, healing from trauma. And our main body of work is with military veterans. So we use what I like to call the magical properties of Shakespeare, and I'm sure you're going to want to get into that a little bit more, because that's part of what's so unique and amazing about this work. But also the idea of being able to put our whole, really embody telling our story and embodying meaning it literally, and getting up and using our body and our voice in all aspects of what we bring to telling a story. And by doing that through a theatrical experience, people who are having a hard time telling their own story are able to express themselves with the mask of character, and they can use the words that are already written for them that allow them to express something that is very, very difficult for them to express, or maybe even at this point in time, impossible for them to express.
And that is such that's just so powerful. I'm not a veteran. My dad was in the Marines in Korea, and he was able to tell some stories, but we always kind of knew there were some things that just kind of lighthearted on. But I have my own traumas from a lot of medical and repeated failed surgeries, so I can connect to that, and it's so difficult. And literally, just gonna say it, men, we just don't talk, which is not good. So we don't help matters much. But anyway, so this is really great. And I did get to see one of your performances, and it was very impressive, and it's such a great outlet.
Yeah, and I'll say right off the bat, our performances are what we do for civilian outreach, and the veterans that take part in that are people that have been with us over time. They've been through our direct work. The real core of our work is our direct work, which is mostly in the VA. We do 3-day weekend workshops that really allow them to immerse into the work. And that's really about the therapeutic process of that. It's not about performance. We try and stay away even from the language of performance. We don't talk about the fact that we're performing or that we're going to have an audience or any of that kind of stuff, because it's really about allowing them to experiment in a really safe context of what it's like to get up and express, the range of emotions. One of the things that we talk about when they come into the room is that, emotions, and let me backtrack a little bit. The vast majority of the veterans that we work with inside the VA system come out of the residential programming. So these are folks, mostly men, but some women as well, who've really hit bottom in their trying to find their way through the civilian world again once they've separated from the military. Whatever is challenging them, substance abuse or depression or suicidal ideation or physical disability or any number of things that are giving them a hard time being able to just find their place back in normal society again. And so they're going to be in really intensive therapy and talk therapy. And one of the distinctions that we make from that is that in talk therapy, there's the agenda of helping them manage their emotional life. And then there's also there's a little bit of a bias of the good emotions and the bad emotions. And for actors, our emotions are our paint box. All emotions we value all of them equally, because you need the entire range to express story, to tell story. But then our bias is that you need the entire range to have a satisfying life as well, to be able to have full relationships with the people in your life, to be able to manage the stress that comes up in your life. You need your whole toolbox of emotions, and there aren't ones that should be put away and ignored, but they need to be expressed in a healthy and productive way instead of overwhelming you or having to put them entirely away and being just numb in the situation. So that's really what we're looking to do in our weekends.
That's very powerful indeed. Yeah. Yes.
That's what we hear from the veterans time. It's a big relief to them to hear that, because we don't get veterans coming in. Occasionally, every long once in a while, we get somebody coming in going, oh, I always wanted to be an actor, or I was an actor in high school, or whatever. Sometimes we get that. And it's very rare for us to get somebody who's like, oh, I love Shakespeare. We do get that very occasionally, but not usually. Most of the time, we're sort of dragging people in a little bit, or their therapists are nudging them, or they've talked to somebody else in programming who's had a really good experience with us, and they're encouraging them to go. And so they come in, and I always tell them, we go in the week before at dinner time into the domiciliary, and I explain what's going to go on and invite them to come. And I'll talk to people one-on-one, and I'll go, just come Friday. Just come Friday night and try it out. And if it's not for you, you can leave, and it's not a problem. No hard feelings. We're totally happy to let you try it out and decide whether it's for you. And it's really, really rare for us to lose anybody. We do lose people occasionally, because part of the work is to allow them to experience manageable stress. And in the early parts of PTSD treatment, even the tiniest little bit of stress is too much stress. And so occasionally we'll get somebody who's really new into their work in processing PTSD, and they just can't do it. And what we do is we hope that we'll see them down the road a little bit once they've learned to be able to deal with just a little bit of stress. But we get folks in, and they are relieved to find out that, first of all, what we do is it's set up for success. So they're not going to be humiliated or embarrassed. They're not going to fail. We've never, ever had anybody who failed at it. We're very, very flexible. We're able to work with any number of the kinds of things that we see with one of the and I'm jumping all over the place now, but we have specialized techniques that allow us to do that. And one of the techniques allows us to work with one of the main things we see in modern conflicts, which is TBI, traumatic brain injury.
Yes.
War is a lot more survivable than it used to be. And a lot of the modern conflicts are dealing with IEDs, and that means there's a lot of explosions going on. And every time they're near an explosion, their brain is literally rattled around in their head. And so a lot of veterans come back from combat issues with varying degrees of traumatic brain injury. And one of the telltale signs of that is just it's very hard to hang on to memory. And so one of our techniques is that we don't expect them to read it off the page. I mean, seasoned actors don't like to read Shakespeare off the page. It's hard. The language is hard. It's a struggle to do that. And so one of our techniques is that we stand at their shoulder when they're doing the scene work, and we read a piece of the line. And then they repeat it, and they can do with it whatever. But with TBI, we can completely be flexible with that, down to a word, to being able to read just one word at a time if we need to do that. Usually it's, we can give a phrase or half a line, and they can hang on to that as well. So it's a really, it's such a really great experience for them to come in and know that that anything goes. They can talk about anything as long as they are respectful of the people in the room, and you know, and not, it's not harmful or illegal or disrespectful. There's nothing that doesn't go. And we've had amazing conversations and amazing, you know, people really getting into some things that they never thought they were going to be able to talk about. And so it's pretty beautiful and amazing work.
There's a few things in there that you touched on, which I find interesting, because the work I do with my nonprofit Hope Instilled is focused on chronic pain, because that's what I've been through. And
Yes.
you just said TBI, and I'm like, oh, I definitely know what that means, because I had my back of my head smacked from a severe auto accident. But what you talked about with sometimes, you know, they'll come in and they kind of go back, and they're turned away because they may, you described it well, they're new to the PTSD. And I always tell people that it's when someone's ready, because it took me years to become ready to start moving forward in a number of things. And I kept having more things going on because I guess I needed more lessons, but I kind of laugh about that. But the time came that I knew I needed to do this nonprofit. So what I tell people is, literally, I want people to come to our website and leave. Yeah. Because they'll at least know that it's here, and for what you offer, whether it's Feast of Crispian, we have a lot of the different arts programs. They know it's there, for one thing, and then when they're ready, they can come back.
That's right.
And the other thing is that they'll try yours out, and that might be the best thing there is, but it also may open them to other things.
Exactly. We see that all the time. Yeah.
The world just opens up.
Yeah.
So what was the passion? What brought you to want to do this and be a part of this amazing program?
Well, that's twofold, because I have my personal passion, and then there's the passion of the organization and the group. I have my two partners, Bill Watson and Jim Tassie, who both are professors at UWM, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and in the theater department, and actors and directors. And we all had this really strong passion for Shakespeare. And my own personal one is that I grew up in an activist family, and I really had this strong sense that unless I was doing something that was, you know, helping people or bettering the world, I wasn't whole. I just didn't feel whole until I was doing something like that. And so when the opportunity came along, and it was really inspired out of a Shakespeare company out in Lenox, Massachusetts, called Shakespeare and Company, one of the oldest Shakespeare companies in the country. And they have a really dynamic, amazing education department. And all of us have trained, and Bill's taught and acted with them as well, and all the rest of us have done some trainings out there. And so we were really connected with them, and they have a program called Shakespeare in the Courts, which is actually it's a alternative sentencing programs for juvenile offenders. And it's a really powerful and amazing program. And we looked at that program and wanted to bring something like that here to Milwaukee, and we were just really excited about doing that. And so initially we were looking at work and at doing the same kind of thing. Long story about how that went. We weren't getting a lot of resistance, but it's a very, very different thing dealing with juveniles. It's very hard to work in situations where you can't get data, and you can't really, it's a very, very different and difficult situation. But while that was going on, I heard a radio program about the dire need for programming in the VA system. And they were specifically talking just about mental health programming But in that story, it came up that one of the things that they were really committing to do more of was arts programming, which they were finding was incredibly effective in helping them deal with the enormous problems that they were seeing in the men and women that were coming back from combat in these more recent conflicts. And that's also, it's a whole nother story, because it's just, there's a lot of really different kinds of things than, say, our Vietnam vets that we work with as well. They have a really different experience of combat and of their support as well. So we thought we would give that a try, and we were very quickly embraced by the VA system here in Milwaukee. And I just want to put a shout out to them, because they are really amazing. We're really, really lucky here. The VA system is a very, it's a very amorphous, separate system. So I always tell people, if you've been to one VA hospital, you've been to one VA hospital. They don't really have a coherent system throughout the United States. And ours here at Zablocki is extremely efficient. They have a wide range of programming, and they have some of the best programming in the country that they've got going on here. So they were amazing at getting us involved. We were actually the very first group of our kind to come inside the VA system and be working with the veterans there. And right from our first weekend, we had such an amazing experience with the veterans that came in and experienced it, that we knew we were in the right place. So we've been there ever since. And we're really interested. We always say that we work with trauma. We're really interested in also outreaching. And this feels like a very, when all the COVID stuff gets dealt with, of really looking at some of the more social justice issues as well. And we've been looking a long time at reaching out and working with other kinds of first responders, working with the police and the fire department and things like that as well.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Wow. So,
and we love Shakespeare. Switch it. So here, I'm not even going to let you get to the next question, because I have to say that before we end up. I have to talk about what you asked about, the passion, and that, and that's for all of us is the Shakespeare. And we came into this really passionate about Shakespeare, period. But then the things that we have learned by doing this are absolutely incredible as well. Again, I want to backtrack a little bit. I want to say something about PTSD, because you were talking about how you have to move through that and be ready for it. And one of the things that I think is really important for people to understand is that that's a brain change. It's biological. It's not an idea. It's not that they're too weak to be able to man up and get better, or not be so wimpy and all this stuff. Trauma changes the brain. And it is a matter of, and one of the incredible things about all the stuff that's coming out now is understanding how elastic the brain is, and that we can indeed heal those kinds of things in the brain, and we can build new neural pathways and reconnect the kinds of things that get disconnected in PTSD. An explanation of that idea of how they can't really handle stress, because in PTSD, all stress tells the system that life is under threat. And so that's why in the beginning, it's just not possible for them to even deal with a tiny little bit, because it feels like they're going to die. And so they have to take themselves off until they can come back to a point where they can start to recognize, oh, I'm feeling stress right now, and I can tolerate a little bit of this until we see what's really going to happen here and what's going on. So the amazing thing about Shakespeare, that we have been able to put all this together through a lot of the incredible science that's going on right now with this, is that Shakespeare indeed works completely differently in the brain than than the conversation that we're having right now, or factual language.
right.
It works differently. And one of the examples of that is how metaphor works. And Shakespeare is, of course, poetry. Most of what Shakespeare is poetry. And Shakespeare, even in the non-verse part of Shakespeare, is loaded with imagistic language, with metaphor. And the way that PTSD functions in the brain is that it shuts down all of the sensorial parts of the brain, because to feel things feels really bad. And also, you can't be overwhelmed with your feelings if you're trying to run away from danger, right? And so those parts of the brain get turned off. And you can't understand metaphor without having the sensorial parts of your brain turned on. So when we're working with a bunch of metaphor and they're speaking those metaphors out loud and they're making sense of them, those centers of the brain, the smell and the visual center and the touch center and all of those kinds of things, very gently blink back on again so that they can make sense of what they're saying. For example, plum lips, right? In order to understand what someone means when they're referring to plum lips, you have to have both the experience of plums as well as knowing what lips are, right? Okay. And so you may have to go back in and know that a plum, you know, what your experience of plum, it's juicy, it's sweet, it's a beautiful color, it's shiny, tastes good, right? That sounds like an amazing set of lips, right? So it's that kind of thing where they have to be able to essentially go into their memory of sensorial experience. But when we're in the sensory parts of our brain, it literally works in our bodies. So it's not obvious, but if you're in your smell center, you're going to get a little sense of that smell, a little whiff of that. If you're in the touch center, you're going to have a little bit of sensation in your body going on when you're doing that. And so it's very, very, very good at helping their brains start to reconnect again, and in a really, really gentle way. So there's a bunch of other things to it, the rhythm and all of it, but it's just really, it's exciting stuff.
It is, and you know, anything mental health is one of the biggest, to me, I think it's one of the biggest invisible disabilities, invisible
Yes.
health condition, whichever way you want to state it. You know, mine is anxiety, depression,
right?
Complex PTSD, dissociative amnesia. It's like I can't remember my kids growing up because of all my surgeries were in there. But we lose in society when we don't understand that just because somebody looks fine doesn't mean they are fine.
Yes.
And then the stigmas come in, and those really, so many people have been lost through the years. And it's great, all of these programs and what we're being allowed, what we're being allowed to do with this event is to bring these out, because each person has so much to give no matter where they are in life.
Absolutely.
And you meet so many amazing people, I am sure of it.
Yeah.
Itself is such a rewarding experience.
Yeah.
So, are there any upcoming events? I know COVID is really kind of created some problems for you.
Yeah, and you know, you and I talked a little bit about that before we were recording here, about the fact that for live theater, it's just it's no amount of Zoom innovation or any of that kind of stuff can recreate what it is to be in the same room with somebody and to be able to feel the vibration of each other's voices and that energy that you create together in a group, in a room, and the kind of, you know, we always talk about the fact that in theater, there's the story that's going on stage, but the audience is actually another character in that whole thing, because their response to it creates part of what happens on stage all the time. And so you need all of that. You need all of that. So we do not have a lot going on right now. The VA has been closed to any outside groups since March. And we're in negotiation with them for when it might be safe to start coming in with smaller groups and you know, obviously all the protocol that goes along with that, which is a whole nother thing in itself. You know, it's hard to do theater when somebody's wearing a mask,
Yes.
but that's a lesser issue for us than just being in the room with people. You know, we've always got stuff going on. We're always in contact with our core vets. A lot of one of the things that the veterans also love about us is when they go into the VA system, a lot of the things that they get to do when they're in the residential programming is not available to them once they're no longer living on campus. And we are always available to them, quite literally. You know, most of them can have contact with me for sure anytime. So we have weekly meetings that we're doing right now on Zoom, and we do different things with that. We've been looking at other poetry besides just Shakespeare, and in that we've got collaborations that we're doing. We're in our second year. We're collaborating with the Medical College of Wisconsin, doing an NEH grant on training veterans to be conversation leaders with other veterans and having very deep conversations about moral injury. And so by bringing some of the stories out of Shakespeare into the room, that can help them elicit their feelings and their thoughts and their memories around some of the moral injury and that moral conflict that so many veterans suffer from when they've been in combat. That it's not even necessarily in combat. There are other things in the military that can cause that kind of stuff, but a lot of the veterans that we deal with are combat vets.
Right.
So we're doing that. We're working on what comes next. We're in the middle of writing our performances that I said in the beginning are our really our outreach, so that we can get civilians and veterans talking to each other. A big issue on both sides of it. Veterans don't think that civilians care anything about their experience, and civilians are afraid that they don't understand, and therefore they're afraid to talk to veterans. They're worried that they're going to say something wrong, or they're worried about what they're going to hear that maybe they don't necessarily want to hear. And so we really, and you know, I think another one, because this was my sense when we first started this, I thought, wow, what is this going to be like? What do I have in common with these people that I'm not a veteran? Jim Tassie, who's one of my partners, is a veteran. He's a Vietnam era veteran. And it obviously that was disabused within the first 10 minutes of sitting in the room with them, that, you know, veterans are like any other population. They are broadly diverse, come from all sorts of different backgrounds. And I've never looked back as far as that goes. And so it's really a big mission. Part of our mission is to help civilians feel a lot more confident and comfortable talking with veterans and talking about real stuff, and not just saying thank you for your service and being able to move on after that, but to really engage with them and have discussions. And we've always, what we do, there's always a Shakespeare element to what we do, but by our second year of performance, we had started to bring in the veterans' own stories to that and mix that all in together. So the current production that we're working on is our second original production, and that one is really focusing on the Vietnam veteran experience. There's a group of Vietnam veterans that have met for years and years and years, and one of the unique things about them is that each one of them has found their way on their journey of healing a lot through the arts. A lot through service as well, but many of them have written poetry, or they started Guitars for Vets, or, you know, any number of these kinds of things. And so we're looking specifically at the Vietnam veteran experience of war, which was very different than the current ones, and also their coming home was entirely different than what goes on now. As most people understand, they did not get a good welcome when they came home. So we're working on that, and that the working title of that is Honor Flight, and we're set to produce that next August, I believe. So that's what we got on.
I love the title.